Hello, my friends, and welcome back to Momentum Boost. I am your host, Adrienne Gold Davis, and once again, I am grateful that you're joining me today. So as we're in the month of the Jewish value of teaching our children, we at Momentum are continuing to mine this deep and rich seam of wisdom, and today's topic is perennial. You see, when my kids were growing up, getting them to speak to me and to others respectfully, well, let's just say it was an ongoing theme. At each developmental change and stage, that conversation had to begin anew. And when my boys were really small, they used to not just exhibit chutzpah, but they would whine endlessly. So, of course, I tried humor. I would say things like, okay, Mr. Weinstein, what's going on? Or, would you like some cheese with that wine? I laughed, but I also punished them and sometimes consequenced them. And sometimes I'm afraid to say I spoke rudely right back to them. So as parents, we want our children to politely listen and to follow directions, but also we want to teach them to raise their voices and to advocate for what's right and to strive to change the world. So the child who's usually the most strong-willed is often seen as a challenge to us, but the truth is, ultimately, that trait will serve them well as adults, especially when they use that strong will to advocate, to stand up for injustice, or to refuse to do things that their friends are doing that they know is wrong. We have to find the words and the strategies to hone their trait, make it effective, but not squash their spirits in the process. And here to help us with all of this is the renowned parenting expert, Dr. G. She joins us today to tackle that tension head on, and she's going to share tools that we can use to boost our kids' confidence while ensuring that they show respect for everyone. So Dr. G is an expert on resilience. She works with families and educators and executives and businesses to identify the mindset and the strategies that turn stress to an advantage. She can be seen regularly on the Today Show, on Good Morning America, and she's the resilience expert for the doctors. She's also frequently featured in the Washington Post, in the New York Times, in the Huffington Post, and countless other digital and print outlets. Dr. G is a board-certified attending family physician. She's fluent in American Sign Language. She lives in Pittsburgh with her 4 boys. And if you want to ask her a question, and I know you will, just type it into the chat box on your right. Welcome, Dr. G.
Thank you so much, Adrienne. It's really lovely to be back talking to you about these issues that never go away, right? And it's good that they never go away. It's not that they don't go away because we've failed to solve some sort of problem. They never go away for exactly the reason that Adrienne mentioned, which is our kids have opinions, they have power, they have a voice, and they're trying to figure out when and how to use it to their best advantage. What we're going to talk about today are both of those issues: how to get them to speak up when it's the right thing to do, and how to get them to, as one of my kids would say, shushy when it's the right thing to do, and how to get them to use their voice in a way that gets them heard, that makes people want to listen and want to help them. Here's the thing. In the world, tone matters. Attitude matters. Many of us heard when our kids were little, especially, we'd maybe take them to play at one of our family members' home, or take them to preschool or some sort of taught learn situation, and somebody would say, oh, they're lovely. And if a parent ever said something like, oh boy, they're tough at home sometimes, often that educator or that other adult would say, well, that's because home is where they're safe. It's because they love you. It's such a good sign that they can really tell their true feelings and they don't have to pretend or be super polite. But here's the thing. Both those things are true. That it's really good that your kids know they're safe with you, that they can have any feeling and you still love them and accept them. And it's important, as Adrienne knew with her kids, that they learn how to express those feelings in ways that are tolerable to other people to hear. Did you know, for example, that whining, although nearly universal in little kids, is not a necessary developmental stage? It's not like learning to what we call cruise, where a kid pulls themselves up and moves while holding on to things before they can walk without holding on to things. Cruising is a necessary developmental step towards walking. Well, whining is not a necessary developmental step towards talking or asking nicely. Kids are very practical. They'll do what works. So if your child whines, and even 1 time in 10 it works with you, they'll still try it because the easiest thing. Kids will try the easiest, most comfortable way to solve their problem. They're a lot like grown-ups that way. We try the easiest, most comfortable ways to solve our problems, and only when that doesn't work are we willing to put a little bit more effort into it. True? One of the reasons that tone matters is because of how our kids will be perceived in the world. Adrienne, you whined the loudest, so you get the first cookie, said no kindergarten teacher ever. Kindergarten teachers reward the behavior they want. So it's really important for our kids from kindergarten through university to know how to ask for things in ways that make other people want to help them. But here's another reason that tone matters in your home. Tone matters in your home because what you're teaching kids is how they should be spoken to by the people that love them. One of the reasons that you shouldn't just let it go if your kid is being disrespectful to you, insulting, mean, is because they'll think that's what family love looks like, that that's tolerable. And they might put up with a partner or your grandkids speaking to them that way. There was a billboard in my hometown in Pittsburgh for years, actually, that said, the best thing a man can do for his children is to love and respect their mother. I think there's a lot going on in that billboard, but really it speaks to kids are learning what they see, and they will look for unconsciously what they lived, what feels like home and family to them. So if you can make your home a place where people tell their true feelings and speak respectfully, they will get to have that as adults. You're crafting your child's adult home in the way that you structure your own. Another reason that our kids' tone of voice really matters, and not just tone of voice, but also eye rolling and facial expression and body language really matters, is because that's how they're judged by other people. I have a rule in my house about swearing that might surprise you, especially since I'm talking about speaking respectfully. I don't make the rule that my kids may never swear. I make the rule that they may never swear where an adult or a child younger than them can hear them. And I've said, I don't care if they hear you through a closed door or across 3 football fields. If you think you can pull off swearing, and now cursing means something different in every family. There are words that might be allowed on television, but you consider a curse word. That's totally up to you. But if there are words, like a word that you would use when you slam your finger, just an expletive, that you don't feel is truly disrespectful, for example, to a group of people or demeaning in some way, my rule about that is not that I expect that you will never in your life know or speak those words. You might feel differently about that. My point is you have to know when to use them. And when you mess that up, that's when you'll see consequences. So the words themselves, an incredibly personal choice for you. For example, in my house for a 5th grade boy, it's okay to use the word S-U-C-K around your friends, not where a younger child can hear you and not where an adult can hear you. But it's not okay to use a word that makes fun of a group of people, for example, that are cognitively impaired. So the point here is that people will judge you. So when my kids have said, why can't I say this where an adult can hear me? All adults know those words. I say, because even though you are a fundamentally good kid, when an adult hears a kid say a word like that, they make a judgment and they think, oh, maybe that's not such a good kid. Maybe they're not so trustworthy. Maybe I wouldn't want them around my other kids. Maybe they don't control themselves well. They have trouble with their impulses. We just have kind of an because there's grown-up secret code. And I've been really clear with my kids that there is grown-up secret code. Did you know that if you meet a child or a teenager who sir or ma'ams you, you are likely to estimate that person as better raised, having higher values, and being better educated than a child who just says, yeah, thanks. A child that says, yes, sir, or yes, ma'am, goes up in your subconscious estimation. So I've told my kids, don't use contractions with adults if you want them to think well of you. Don't say yeah, say yes. Don't say can't, say, oh, I can't, I'm sorry. So we just try not to use the shorter versions. All of that matters because we are judged on three things. We are judged, all of us, at the confluence of our behavior, our attitude, and our purpose. Here's an example that I sometimes use with students that you can use with your kids if you're trying to get this point across. You say, look, if your attitude is excellent, even if you're behaving in a way that is less than admirable, and your purpose was good, you were trying to do the right thing, usually an adult will either give you a pass on your bad behavior or help you get what it is you were trying to get. If your attitude and your behavior, your attitude is good, but your behavior is bad and your purpose is less than admirable, again, they'll say, You can improve how they see your behavior with your attitude and your purpose, even if your behavior is good, even if your purpose is admirable. If your attitude is lousy, you'll be judged negatively. I use the example in classrooms. I say, if kids are sitting together in a classroom and they're supposed to be working quietly, and one kid pops up and says, oh no, chair falls over backwards. They go slamming out of the room. They slam the door behind them. They come running back in with the EpiPen of the child who sits next to them, who is quietly having an allergic reaction. That child is the hero. If the child does all of those things, goes running out of the room, comes slamming back in, sits down at their desk, and it was because they, under their desk, saw something on TikTok that made them mad at somebody else and they wanted to go put a note in their locker, that kid is in trouble because their purpose mattered, even though their attitude and behavior didn't change. You can give an example, a story for kids where they see that, for example, behavior and purpose stay the same, but their attitude was different, like talking to a teacher about a test where they feel that the teacher didn't understand what they were trying to say in their essay question. Their behavior is questioning the test. Their purpose is to get the teacher to see that maybe the grade should be different. But if their attitude is good, they're far more likely to be successful than if their attitude is bad. In those moments, you can see why it's worth having the attitude argument at home. Why, even though it might be that they're behaving that way because home is a place that they feel safe and they know that you love them no matter what, it is still worth saying, okay, ask me again, ask me more politely. Or, I really appreciate what you're expressing. I need you to express it in a more respectful way. If your child had a really difficult time at school and they came in the house and you said, hi, honey, how was your day? And they slammed the door and threw their backpack and walked upstairs, you might understand that something really difficult had happened. And you might choose to show them some empathy in that moment and give them a little bit of time on their own. But when you come back to them, I hope that first you ask them, hey, what happened? And what do you need? But that at some point in the next few hours, you say, we also need to talk about how you came into the house, because that's not okay. That behavior, not okay. Because if they tried to do that at work, it doesn't matter what they've been through. If they show up in their cubicle and throw their bag and ignore someone, their boss who speaks to them, and stomp off, nobody at work cares what happened right before that, unless 99% of the time, their behavior and attitude are fantastic. And this was the really unusual situation. But that's not usually the case, right? Teaching kids how to express their true emotions and speak respectfully, to separate out their feelings from their behavior every chance they get, and apologize when they don't get it right, because we all don't get it right sometimes. That is really the crux of helping end entitled behavior. Entitled is how I feel matters more than how I behave. And do you know who supports that narrative most often? Parents. Do you know who supports it least? Siblings. Siblings are like, yeah. Cry me a river. If you're not treating me respectfully, if you don't treat me the way I want to be treated, I don't really care what you're feeling. Parents, though, we tend to go too far in the other direction. Oh, when a child behaves badly at any age, we look for the why. And we should. We should ask ourselves, oh, do they have a fever? Are they growing? Did they get enough to eat? Did they need more sleep? Did something happen? All of that is really valuable. And we should care why. We should get curious. But we should also have consequences for bad behavior. And we can separate them out. We can say, I have so much empathy for what you're going through. That's really hard. Also, you can't speak to people that way. We don't treat people that way in our family. So there's a consequence for that. We mentioned in the blurb for our time together, we're going to talk about confidence. We want to raise kids who are confident enough to express their true feelings, to raise their voice when they see something going on that isn't okay. So I want to talk a little bit about the research about how we build confidence in kids. So this is actually really interesting. Many of us work to build confidence through praise, and it can really work. But there are two kinds of praise. There's praise about attributes and praise about actions. Praise about attributes builds connection. Imagine if I saw you at the grocery store and I complimented your hair. You might say thanks. But it's not something you did, it's just something you have. I might hear you singing, compliment your singing voice. And you might have worked to make it a little bit better or to use it well, but it's also partially a gift you were given, right? Something that you just have. And it builds connection. If I compliment something you're wearing or the color of your eyes, it builds connection. I noticed you and you might feel seen and that feels lovely, but it doesn't actually build confidence. If we want to build confidence, especially in kids, we have to praise things that they have control over, choices that they made, actions that they took. And like with everything with kids, the more you talk about something, the more you'll get it. Here's an easy example of that. If you have a kid who has a narrower palate, meaning there are a few foods they like and many more foods that they don't. If you talk about what a picky eater that child is, research shows they will get pickier. If you talk about what a brave eater that child is, because so often when they try a new food, they don't like it. They have to be much more brave than I do, who likes pretty much every food, to try a new food. For me, trying a new food is exciting because I'm probably going to like it. For people with a narrower palate, trying a new food is really a big risk because there's a good chance it's going to be really distasteful to them. So if you talk about what a brave eater your child is, they're more likely to try new things. The research is there. When we talk about a child's actions, we build their confidence because they did it and they could choose to do it again, and they know it. When we talk about their attributes, we not only build connection, but not confidence because they know they didn't do anything, it's just how they are. We also can build their opportunity to have imposter syndrome because if I say, boy, I loved coming to your soccer game, Adrian, because you guys won. When's your next game? You may say, well, I don't know if we're going to win our next game. You might not enjoy it. But if I say, I really enjoyed coming to your soccer game because you guys worked together so hard, you communicated so clearly, and you were such good sports, when's your next game? I can tell you when my next game is because we can do and will do all those things again. We can control that. We can't control if we win. So we really want to work to praise what kids chose and what they did and praise what you want more of. So how do you figure out how to get kids to speak up and advocate, but not talk back? That's in the attitude. That's in how they ask. Younger kids need some really clear guidelines, like the difference between telling and tattling. The difference between telling an adult about something someone's doing that's against the rules and tattling is what you do if somebody's in danger. Physical danger, emotional danger, jumping up and down on the glass coffee table, that's just telling because that's stopping something bad before it happens. Tattling is when it's not really hurting anybody, but you'd like to see them get in trouble because you like that the rules are enforced and you want it to be fair because you didn't do that thing and they should get in trouble. So helping kids understand telling versus tattling, helping them understand how to advocate for what they see as right or what they believe happened using respectful tone and language and waiting their turn. That stuff matters. Here's another example. We had to make a rule for one of our sons when he was quite small that he wasn't allowed to begin a sentence to an adult with the word but. He could say, oh, I thought. This came about because he was getting a ride somewhere with one of his friend's mom, and she was talking about the Olympics and where it had been held in the Winter Olympics previous, and she was wrong about where it was. And he said, but they were at this place. And she was embarrassed and she felt he'd been really disrespectful. And she said she didn't want to drive him anymore in carpool. And we said, and he's like, but I was right. And we're like, it doesn't matter. What matters is how you express it. She couldn't hear you. If you said, oh, I thought maybe those Winter Olympics were in this city, that's okay. That person may or may not have been able to hear it, but that's an acceptable way to express yourself to an adult, because being respectful is equally as important as being right, which is a hard lesson for some of us to get, especially with our siblings. In just a minute, I'm going to ask Adrian to come back and we're going to try and answer some of the questions that you're putting in the chat for us. But before we do that, I just want to mention that in all of this, our kids aren't going to get it right a lot of the time. And to Adrian's point, we're not always going to get it right. We're going to speak disrespectfully, snap at someone, make the less than kind joke at a family member's expense. And all of those are opportunities for us to show how we want our kids to handle it when they mess up. All of that is the worst part of parenting, which is modeling. Adrian, do you agree that that's the worst part of parenting, or am I on my own?
It's certainly the hardest.
Right.
Well, I have to tell you something, Debbie, when you were speaking, it really struck me that there is a halacha, which is Jewish law, that you're not allowed to contradict your parents. You're not allowed to say but, or you're not allowed to say you're wrong, but rather you have to form it in the form of a question. So you have to say, is it possible that the Olympics were also held at Kyoto or whatever? And that is the Jewish law. And I remember teaching that to my kids, and they would say things like, Mommy, is it possible that you're crazy? Mommy, is it possible that you never remember to turn on your turn signal? So, even they were able to manipulate it. Okay, so let's get a few questions out there. What do you say to a kid who whines a lot? Do you say, go calm down? Do you say, try again? What else would you say?
So there's two really important points in that question. And one is, so Adrian, when one of your kids tells you, or anyone, your partner, a friend, anybody, tells you to go calm down, how does that feel?
Oh, I want to rip their eyes out, frankly.
Pretty much, right? I mean, and I totally hold that don't worry, mom are the three most useless words in any language in a sentence, right? So telling people how to feel is pretty useless. It doesn't work, so it's ineffective. Also, it's disrespectful. It's saying how you feel is dumb, try again. So, and I understand that that wasn't the only option this person gave us, but I just want to mention that kids' feelings, and we talked about this last week, kids' feelings, anyone's feelings, are theirs. We shouldn't have rules about feelings, but we have to have rules about behavior. So try again is a lovely thing to say, but just telling somebody what not to do isn't as effective, and the research is on here. It isn't as effective as telling them what to do. So instead of saying, don't whine, try saying, could you ask me respectfully? And I don't want to say just use the magic word, because one of my kids, when he was 2, his first full sentence was, can I please use the matches? And I was like, thank you for asking so nicely, and absolutely not, right? So it isn't really a magic word if they ask for things we're not going to let them do. So saying, can you try asking me respectfully, or can you try asking me nicely, really helps. But I want to give you a hack for whining in particular. It's impossible to whisper and whine. So if your child says, I want juice, and you say, can you try asking me respectfully? And they say, can I please have juice? And you're like, oh, they did better, but it's still nails on a chalkboard. Then you can simply say, come whisper it to me, because it's impossible to whisper and whine. And then as soon as they do, you can answer them.
Okay, that is so brilliant. Do you think that would work with your spouse as well?
Whisper sweet nothings in my ear, honey.
I'm totally going to try that. Okay, another question. What about a child who spoke with chutzpah to a teacher, but when you got the full story out of it, the teacher was disrespectful to the child?
Then I think it's a really important time to teach the lesson. Look, not too many of our kids in the Jewish community are kids of color, but all of all of our kids need to learn that in certain situations with authority, and I'm speaking specifically about kids of color with the police or anything like that, but anybody needs to learn how to swallow it. And there are times when that is the most respectful and sometimes where it is the safest thing to do. And kids have to learn that skill. So you can have a ton of empathy for their frustration, for their righteous indignation,
Right.
and say, also, you need to learn this skill as much as it's unfortunate.
And if they say, why should I let somebody speak to me that way?
You say the time to address that they spoke to you that way is not in the moment because there's a power inequity here. You have to recognize the power inequity. And I will try to help you to rectify any power inequity you're stuck in, but not in that moment. In that moment, you will lose.
Oh my gosh, that is so genius. Could we
Well,
just
and you
put the time
gain,
capsule?
if an adult speaks to you disrespectfully and you speak back to them very respectfully, you win.
Oh, you're so smart.
It's hard. It's really
I'm going to
hard.
make some very serious apologies this afternoon after this. Okay, next question. This one is my favorite. Why is it that three other words can be so triggering? They can be a combination of whining and chutzpah. That's not fair.
And so how many of us have a snarky answer right at the ready for this? You know, how many of us have thought or heard or said, life isn't fair, sweetheart? So often our kids confuse equal and fair.
Okay, go on.
So if there's a birthday cake and I have 4 kids, right, and they're only 6 years apart. So let's imagine that since they're teens, they all have the same size appetite. If somebody gets a really small piece of birthday cake and somebody gets a really big piece of birthday cake, that's not equal and it's not fair. But
Okay.
my 18-year-old moved to another country this year. If I had therefore had my 12-year-old move alone to another country this year, that would be equal, but not fair.
Ooh.
Right? Or overnight camp. If I sent my 15-year-old to overnight camp or my 10-year-old to overnight camp, and therefore also sent my 4-year-old to overnight camp, that would be equal and not fair. They're not ready. So equal and fair, developmentally, little kids think they're exactly the same thing, but older kids have to start to learn the difference. And it's a really important conversation that won't work in that moment. When somebody says, that's not fair, you can just say, I hear you. I totally hear that that's how that feels to you. Or if you have time for it and you think they have the bandwidth for it, you can say, can you tell me about feelings instead of making a judgment?
Oof. Oh my gosh.
Which is
Okay.
hard.
What if you had to define fair and equal for a child, say under 10? How would the definition look?
I actually have said just that to my 8-year-old. I've said, yes, if it's a piece of cake, you should get one the same size as your brother's. But then I'll pick something that his older brother was really excited to go do that he wouldn't want to do and say, you know, if we use your definition of fair, you would have had to go, shovel the neighbor's sidewalk or whatever it is.
Okay,
And
so you're
they
saying,
start to get it in examples.
okay, so you want to contextualize it. And,
Yeah.
and I think it's probably never too soon to have that conversation. Okay, there's another question.
Equal would be you staying up tonight to fold the laundry, honey, instead of getting a story. And because last night you got a story and I folded the laundry, tonight I get a story and you fold the laundry.
Oh, you're so smart. Okay, next question. My son, who is 10, uses death or die in his comebacks to his siblings. How do I teach him to stop doing this? I have already had several conversations with him about this. He would say, you'll be dead, or you're going to die, in response to being confronted by his siblings. Oh yeah, we've all heard that one.
I think that's true. I think a lot of kids will use it's true, so I can say it. Not all truths are respectful to point out. But another thing, and this is something parents talk to me about bickering. We have to know the difference between bickering and bullying. Bickering is when both kids are in equally, they're tugging the rope equally, they have an equal amount of power. We have to teach, if one kid really doesn't like it, then we teach them how to drop the rope. But if both kids are fine with it, then it's like picking your nose. I don't want to see it or hear it. You can go do that alone in your room. And so in the same way, you can say, so here's the thing, hun, like swear words, this is hard for a lot of adults to hear. You're not wrong. It's absolutely true. But it feels to me like a real lack of empathy on your part. It might not be, but that's how it feels to me. And because I'm the grown-up, I'm saying that respectful behavior to me means you stop saying that. Those are my kids you're talking about.
Dr. G, I love you. I think we are all like, we'd love to spend a whole day picking your brain. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but the conversation has been, as always, ingenious. You're just too much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I really hope you're going to join me again soon in the future.
Absolutely. Everyone have a Chag Sameach, and ask your kids interesting questions at the Seder, because they've got a lot of really interesting ideas and they'll really appreciate the respect of having you listen to what they think.
Oh, you're so smart. So, it's funny. I was just thinking of something else too, and then I've got to wrap up. And that is that in Hebrew, in modern Hebrew, people say "ze lo fair" because there's no biblical word for fair as a concept. It doesn't really exist. So our language understands it. Okay, everybody, we're going on a break for Passover. I have a... Can you hear me now? Okay, great. I accidentally muted myself. Okay, so we're going to be on break for Passover. So you got to be sure to join us next Monday, April the 5th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, because we're going to have a boost that's going to commemorate Yom HaShoah, which is Holocaust Remembrance Day. So on Yom HaShoah, we remember the enormous tragedy of the Holocaust, and we honor survivors' stories of despair, courage, tenacity, and hope. Please join us for a very special Zikaron Basalon, which means remembrance from our living rooms. It's an engaging, intimate way to commemorate Yom HaShoah with video testimony, with a discussion. You're going to hear testimony from a survivor, and you're going to learn how each one of us can become an activist, assuring that their stories never fade and we never forget. And of course, Dr. G, she's coming back on Thursday, April 8th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. It's such a good time because most of your kids are in bed, or if they're teenagers, they're just waking up. And she's doing her last episode of her 3-part series on Jewish parenting strategies. She's going to be discussing whatever comes next, how to raise problem solvers. All you have to do is you go to momentumunlimited.org/Jewish parenting series, and you can register. And we'll send you a link to the first 2 episodes as well, so you don't miss that. And we're tackling head on a very serious topic, anti-Semitism. Thinking about hate, it's hard, but to recognize and combat it, you need to understand where it comes from, how it affects us and your loved ones. So on a special 3-part Momentum Boost series, we're going to explore the origins of modern anti-Semitic language. We're going to learn why anti-Semitism is sadly on the rise on college campuses. We're going to recognize its devastating effect on the world today, and we're going to learn how we can combat it. This 3-part series has been made possible by the Russ Berry Foundation. We're so grateful for that. So you're just going to go to momentumunlimited.org/modern anti-Semitism, a guide to understanding and tackling hatred. And you'll go register now. We're also going to ask you if you'll fill out just a little short poll. It'll only take you a second because it helps us continue to provide relevant and meaningful Jewish content for you. So I'll miss everybody next week when we're off for Passover. But from me, Adrienne Gold Davis, and all of us at Momentum, please remember that as we learn and we grow together, well, the highest form of wisdom is kindness. We wish you and your families a meaningful Passover. May we all embrace newfound freedom this year. See you in a week.